The metallic walls of the neutral station gleamed under artificial lights as Captain James Morrison walked into the conference room. He had no idea that his life was about to change forever. The message had come through diplomatic channels just hours ago. 2 alien princesses wanted to meet him specifically. Not the president, not the military commanders. Him. Morrison was a simple military officer, known more for his quiet thinking than his loud orders. He had earned respect on Mars colonies, in deep space negotiations, and most importantly, for making impossible decisions when nobody else could. But this seemed different. This felt bigger than anything he had ever faced. The doors slid open, and the 2 princesses entered the room together. They were beautiful in ways that no human words could properly describe. Their skin shimmered with colors that seemed to shift between purple and silver under the lights. Their eyes were large and held intelligence that felt ancient and powerful. They moved with grace, but their body language showed tension. Something was very wrong. Princess Elia spoke first. Her voice carried harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate. "Captain Morrison, we have come to seek your help because your species has something that ours has lost. The ability to choose hope when all seems impossible." She paused, looking at her sister. "We come from the Vexterra Empire. For 3,000 years, our people have been perfect. Our decisions are calculated. Our logic is complete. We never fail." Princess Lyra, her sister, continued. "But perfection has become a prison. Our empire is dying, and our leaders cannot understand why. They cannot make the choice that must be made because all their choices are mathematically calculated to be safe. There is no choice that their logic will accept. So they sent us here." Morrison sat down slowly. He gestured for them to sit as well. "Tell me what happened," he said simply. Elia began to explain. The Vexterra Empire had expanded across half the galaxy. They were superior in technology, mathematics, and logic. Every decision was made through computers that calculated millions of possible outcomes. Every war was won before it started because they knew exactly what would happen. Every alliance was formed only if the numbers showed it would benefit them. But then they discovered something unexpected. Their sun was dying faster than their calculations had predicted. Not in 1,000 years, in 50. Their entire civilization had 1 generation to find a solution or face extinction. "Our leaders gathered the greatest minds," Lyra said. "They ran every calculation, every computer model, every prediction. There were 3 possible solutions. The first was to invade a neighboring star system and take their sun's energy. The mathematics showed we would win, but it would destroy their entire civilization. The second was to make a peace treaty with our oldest enemies and combine our resources. But the calculations showed that within 200 years, we would destroy each other anyway. The third solution was to accept our fate and prepare our people for ending." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. "Those are your only 3 options?" "According to every calculation, yes," Elias said. "And none of them are truly acceptable. The first solution makes us killers. The second is only delayed death. The third is surrender. Our entire people are waiting for their leaders to choose, but the leaders cannot. Because there is a fourth option that the mathematics says is impossible." "What is the fourth option?" Morrison asked. "To unite with your species," Lyra said quietly. "To combine human creativity with our technology. To create something completely new that no calculation predicted because human imagination cannot be calculated. But this solution shows 0% chance of success in every model. It is illogical." Morrison leaned back in his chair. He understood now why they had come to him. They had come to the place where logic ended and hope began. They had come to humans because humans did impossible things all the time. "Your leaders don't accept this idea," Morrison stated. "They consider it fantasy," Elia confirmed. "Our emperor believes that any civilization that relies on chance or hope or faith is primitive. He fears that joining with humanity would weaken our bloodline, our perfection, our superiority." Lyra's eyes filled with something that looked like tears, though Morrison had no idea if Vexterra could actually cry. "But we know something our emperor does not. We have studied your species for many years. We have watched how humans survive impossible situations. We have seen how your soldiers show courage even when they know they will lose. We have observed how your scientists make discoveries based on luck and intuition. We have read your stories, Captain. Your literature shows us that you have done the impossible thousands of times." Morrison's mind was racing. This was not a simple diplomatic meeting. This was a princess asking him to convince his entire government to make an alliance that every scientific calculation said would fail. This was asking humanity to risk everything on a hope. "Why are you telling me this?" Morrison asked. "Why not go through official channels?" Elia's shimmer seemed to brighten with what might have been respect. "Because we needed to find someone who would understand that the impossible is merely the path less calculated. We needed someone who could convince your leaders not with numbers, but with faith in what humans can become. We chose you because your records show that you have succeeded in 53 situations where the odds were over 99% against you." The weight of the moment settled on Morrison's shoulders. He could refuse. He could tell them to work through official channels and let the politicians and scientists debate for months, while the Vexterra Empire slowly realized that their only choice was extinction. Or he could do something crazy, something human, something impossible. "I need to ask you something," Morrison said, looking directly at both princesses. "If I help you, if I convince my people to do this, and it fails, will your species blame humanity? Will we become the reason your civilization ended?" Both princesses were silent for a long moment. Then Lyra spoke. "Yes, that is very possible." Morrison nodded slowly. That was the answer he needed to hear, because it showed that they understood what they were asking. They were asking humanity to risk not just resources, but its reputation among the stars. He stood up and looked directly at the two princesses. "Then let's do something impossible." The emergency council session lasted 17 hours. Morrison sat in the observation booth and watched as the world's leaders argued about the proposal. Every scientist on Earth had been brought in to analyze the situation. Every military strategist was running scenarios. Every politician was calculating the political consequences. Secretary General Chun voiced what everyone was thinking. "Captain, you are essentially asking us to gamble the future of our species on an alien princess's hope that we are somehow special enough to do the impossible. Do you understand how insane that sounds?" Morrison did not look away from her gaze. "I understand that we are the only species that has proven we can do things even when every calculation says we cannot." Dr. Patel, the world's leading astrophysicist, shook her head. "The mathematics is clear. Even if we provide the Vexterra with every technological advantage we possess, the fundamental problem remains unsolved. We cannot power an entire civilization with the technology we have. Their sun provides energy that would take us centuries to replicate." "Then we don't replicate," Morrison said. "We transform. We change the approach entirely. The Vexterra think in only one direction: more power, more energy, more expansion. What if the answer is not to fight against the dying sun, but to change how civilization uses energy?" General Kowalski leaned forward. "You're talking about fundamentally restructuring how an entire empire works. You're talking about asking 3 billion people to abandon their entire way of life." "I am talking about the only choice that gives them a future," Morrison replied. Princess Elia and Princess Lyra waited outside the council chamber. They had been waiting for hours, and they knew that every moment of debate meant more confusion, more fear spreading through their own people. The Emperor had been furious when they returned home and told him they were seeking alliance with humanity. He had demanded they prove that humans were worth saving. Lyra paced back and forth, her shimmer flickering with distress. "Do you think they will refuse?" she asked her sister. Elia stared out at the stars visible through the station windows. "The logic suggests they will. We are asking them to commit resources and lives to save a civilization that has shown them nothing but suspicion. We are asking them to become partners with aliens they do not understand. All the calculations point to refusal." But Morrison said yes. Lyra reminded her. He understood. "One human is not the entire species," Elia said softly. "The true test is whether humanity can move beyond fear and mathematics of their own kind." Inside the council chamber, the debate had shifted. Scientists were now discussing possibilities rather than impossibilities. A young engineer named Dr. Sarah Kim had proposed something radical. What if instead of trying to power an empire of billions, the Vexterra restructured into smaller, more efficient communities? What if they learned from human history, where civilizations adapted rather than expanded? That would require abandoning everything they are, General Kowalski objected. "No," Dr. Kim said, standing up with passion in her voice. "It would require becoming something better than what they were. Humans did this. We started as tribes. Then we became city-states. Then nations. Then we became a planet that learned to work together. Each time we transformed, we thought it was impossible. Each time, we survived anyway. Secretary General Chun watched the young scientist with interest. This was the human element that the Vextera could not calculate. This was the passion, the belief, the hope that drove species forward. If we do this, Chun said slowly, if we commit to this alliance, we need guarantees. We need to know that the Vextera will not use this as an advantage to dominate us later. Morrison entered the chamber then. With respect, Secretary General, the Vextera cannot guarantee that. Any guarantee they give you will be based on current calculations. But calculations change. Situations evolve. The only guarantee we have is that humanity and the Vextera will face the future together, learning as we go, adapting as we must. That is not a guarantee, someone called out. That is faith. Yes, Morrison said simply. Welcome to humanity. We do almost everything on faith that tomorrow will be better than today. The vote, when it finally came, was not unanimous. 40% of the council believed it was too risky. 30% believed it was a mistake. But 30%, nearly 1 billion humans worth of representation, voted yes. And that was enough. The vote passed. When Morrison delivered the news to the princesses, he saw something in their expressions that he had not expected. Fear. Real, genuine fear. What is wrong, he asked. Your species will survive. That is what you wanted. Elia turned to him. You have given us hope, Captain Morrison. But hope is dangerous because it can be broken. For the first time in our existence, our fate is not guaranteed by calculation. Our survival now depends on something unpredictable. My people will not know how to handle this. Our emperor is already declaring that this is humanity's conspiracy to weaken the Vextera. That is where it gets harder, Morrison said, understanding now what the real challenge would be. It was not convincing Earth. Earth was relatively simple. They had learned to work together despite differences. But the Vextera had spent 3,000 years believing that perfection meant control, that certainty meant survival. The real battle, he continued, is convincing your people that change is not weakness. That adaptation is not failure. That accepting help from another species is not disgrace. Lyra looked at her sister. The Emperor will fight this. Yes, Morrison agreed. He will. And that is when we will learn if humanity's way actually works. Because we are going to have to convince an entire alien empire that hope is more powerful than certainty. And we will have to do it without any guarantee of success. The two princesses stood in silence, understanding now the true weight of the choice they had made. They had asked for salvation, but salvation meant transformation. It meant becoming something new. And as Elia's shimmer flickered with conflicting emotions, she realized something that her people had forgotten in 3,000 years of perfection. Sometimes the most logical choice is to admit that logic has limits. The Joint Research Facility was built on a neutral asteroid, far from both Earth and the Vextera homeworld. Morrison watched as human scientists worked alongside alien engineers for the first time in history. It was beautiful and chaotic and absolutely necessary. Dr. Kim had been appointed as the lead for the human team. She approached problems differently than the Vextera. Where they would compile thousands of data points and run calculations for weeks, she would sketch ideas on a whiteboard, run small tests, fail quickly, and adapt. The Vextera scientists found this deeply disturbing. You are wasting resources, a senior Vextera engineer named Kethal told her during a heated meeting. You tested 400 different approaches yesterday, and 399 failed. This is inefficiency. Dr. Kim smiled. No, this is learning. We tried 400 ways that don't work, which means we just eliminated 400 dead ends. We are closer to a solution than we were yesterday. Kethal's skin flickered with agitation. But the mathematics showed that only 16 approaches had any theoretical possibility of success. Why test the others? Because mathematics is not always right, Dr. Kim said simply. Sometimes the impossible solution works anyway. Sometimes the thing that should not work, works perfectly. Over the next weeks, something remarkable began to happen. Human intuition combined with Vextera processing power started producing results that neither species could achieve alone. A human engineer named Jackson suggested what seemed like a crazy idea. What if instead of creating a single enormous power source, they created millions of small, distributed sources? What if they taught the Vexterra to think in terms of networks instead of centralized control? The Vexterra ran the calculations. Thousands of them. Millions. And slowly, impossibly, the numbers began to show that it might work. Not with certainty. Not with the 99% probability they preferred. But with enough possibility that it was worth pursuing. Back on the Vexterra homeworld, the Emperor was growing more angry. He had sent his most loyal generals to the research facility to gather intelligence. What they reported was disturbing. The young human scientists were somehow influencing the Vexterra engineers. They were spreading ideas of improvisation, of trial and error, of accepting failure as part of progress. This is cultural contamination, the Emperor declared. This is humanity's weakness spreading through our civilization like a virus. But Princess Elia stood before him with an authority that only a royal heir could claim. What you call weakness, the humans call strength. They survive because they adapt. They thrive because they try things that seem impossible. And it is working, Father. For the first time in 3,000 years, we have a path forward that was not predetermined by calculation. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. You have been corrupted by their company. Perhaps, Elia said calmly. But consider this. Before we left for Earth, we had 3 choices, all of which ended in destruction or surrender. Now we have a 4th option that is actually producing results. That is what your calculation could not provide. That is what hope can achieve. The Emperor turned away from her. He sent a message to the military council. If this experiment continued, if humans continued to contaminate Vexterra civilization with their primitive ways of thinking, he would declare the alliance void. Morrison received the warning from Elia. The Vexterra military was preparing to recall all scientists from the research facility. They would seal their borders and attempt to solve the dying sun problem alone, using only pure calculation. He called an emergency meeting with everyone in the facility. Humans and Vexterra stood together in the observation deck, looking at the dying sun that threatened their allied civilizations. The Emperor is afraid, Morrison said to the assembly. He is afraid because for the first time, his species is doing something that cannot be guaranteed by mathematics. He is afraid because humanity is showing that there are other ways to think, other ways to survive, other ways to be strong. Kethal, the senior Vexterra engineer who had questioned their methods weeks ago, stepped forward. The captain is correct. My people have been ordered to leave this facility and return home. The Emperor considers this alliance a threat to our cultural purity. He paused, and in that pause, Morrison saw something extraordinary happening. Kethal was making a choice that no calculation had prepared him for. I am refusing that order, Kethal said, and his entire body seemed to shimmer with the magnitude of that statement. I am choosing to remain here, because I have learned something that every Vexterra mathematical model could not predict. I have learned that progress sometimes requires risk, that survival sometimes requires faith, and that my species needs to learn how to be human just enough to stay alive. Other Vexterra scientists began stepping forward. One by one, they declared that they were staying. They were choosing to continue the work despite the Emperor's orders. They were choosing to trust a process that had no guarantee of success. The news spread quickly. In the Vexterra cities, people began to hear about scientists who had disobeyed the Emperor. They began to hear stories about the impossible project that was actually working. More dangerously, they began to hope. The Emperor found himself facing something he had never encountered before, his own people questioning his authority. Military generals told him that forcing the scientists to return would cause unrest. Civilian leaders reported that the population was becoming restless, wanting to know more about this human science that produced results. Dr. Kim approached Morrison as they watched the news reports coming from the Vexterra homeworld. What happens if the military tries to shut us down? She asked. Then we discover if the Vexterra are truly choosing hope, Morrison replied. Because if they send soldiers to close this facility, they are saying that perfect control is more important than survival. And that will tell us everything we need to know about whether this alliance can actually work. But something different happened instead. A portion of the Vexterra military, led by a commander who had family in the research facility, refused to obey the Emperor's orders. Not in rebellion. That would be too straightforward. Instead, they simply requested transfers or took extended leaves or reported equipment malfunctions. It was the most passive, beautiful resistance Morrison had ever witnessed. The Vextera were learning something new. They were learning how to do the impossible thing that every calculation said they could not do. They were learning how to choose against their own nature, and they were surviving the choice. The Emperor watched from his palace as his civilization began to slip through his fingers. But he did not order a full military crackdown, because somewhere in his perfect, logical mind, he realized something that his daughter had known all along. Sometimes the thing you fear is exactly what you need to survive. The first prototype worked on a Thursday morning. Not perfectly, not with the certainty that calculations had promised, but it worked. A small star engine, no bigger than a human building, powered by distributed networks rather than centralized cores, began to generate energy in a way that had been impossible 5 months before. Dr. Kim stood in the control room with tears streaming down her face. Beside her, Kethal's entire body shimmer was bright gold, the Vextera equivalent of joy. Around them, humans and aliens embraced, celebrating something that should not exist. The Emperor received the news at the same moment that his own son, serving as a military observer at the research facility, sent him a message. The message was simple. Father, I have watched my sister's dream become real. I have watched humans teach us that progress is not shameful. I have watched my people learn to choose hope. You taught us to choose perfection. They are teaching us to choose courage. I request to remain with the Alliance. For the first time in his 20,000 years of existence, the Emperor of the Vextera faced something that his calculations could not account for. His own family was choosing humanity. His own civilization was evolving in ways he could not control. The message he sent back would become famous in both human and Vextera history books. It was simple, and it required the Emperor to abandon everything his species had believed for 3,000 years. Proceed with the integration. The next phase of the project was vastly more complex. They had proven the technology could work. Now they had to teach an entire civilization how to live differently. Millions of Vextera would need to move into smaller communities. Infrastructure would have to be completely rebuilt. Most challenging of all, their entire philosophy of centralized control would have to transform. But this was where humanity showed what 3,000 years of adaptation had taught them. Human civilization had been through dozens of massive restructurings. They had collapsed and rebuilt. They had transformed from agrarian to industrial to digital. Every human culture on Earth carried within it the memory of changing, adapting, surviving impossible transitions. Dr. Kim worked with Vextera historians and social engineers to map out the transformation process. But instead of creating a single perfect blueprint, she did something that scandalized the more traditional Vextera. She created dozens of different models and allowed different regions to choose which approach to follow. How will they choose correctly without complete information? A senior Vextera administrator asked. They will choose what works for them, Dr. Kim explained. Some choices will fail. Some will succeed brilliantly. But the important thing is that they will learn from every choice. The regions that succeed will share their knowledge with regions that failed. That is how humans have always done it. The administrator looked horrified. You are asking them to experiment on themselves. Yes, Dr. Kim said. That is the only way to truly change. You cannot calculate your way to a new civilization. You have to live your way there. Morrison was promoted to ambassador to the Vextera Empire. It was an impossible position. He had to represent humanity while also advocating for Vextera interests. But that was precisely why he was the perfect choice. He understood that this alliance was not about one species being superior to the other. It was about both species recognizing that they were stronger together than apart. Princess Lyra approached him one evening as he looked out at the transformed skies. The Vextera homeworld no longer looked like a place built on calculation. It looked alive. It looked human. It looked beautiful. I want to thank you, she said. Our species would have faced slow extinction. We would have calculated ourselves into oblivion. You gave us something more valuable than technology. You gave us the possibility of failure. Morrison smiled. You gave us something too. We gave you perfect logic. You gave us proof that our way of thinking actually matters. For the first time, humanity is standing as equals with a species we had only dreamed about. We are not inferior. We are simply different. And sometimes different is exactly what is needed. The star engines were completed within 2 years. But by that time, the Vextera civilization had changed so thoroughly that the technology was almost secondary. What mattered was that they had proven something that would echo across the galaxy for generations. When the Vexterra sent first contact messages to other civilizations describing their alliance with humanity, most did not believe them. A primitive species working alongside one of the most advanced civilizations in known space? It seemed absurd. It seemed impossible. But the data was undeniable. The Vexterra sun stabilized. The civilization not only survived, but transformed into something new. And most remarkably, they did it by learning to think like humans. They learned to value intuition. They learned to accept failure. They learned to hope. The Emperor himself made a public declaration broadcast across his entire civilization. "I was wrong," he said, his voice calm and measured. "I believed that perfection came from control. I believed that logic was the path to survival. But I was facing a problem that my logic could not solve. And when I finally accepted help from beings whose way of thinking was completely different from mine, I discovered that my logic had been incomplete all along." Humanity did not give us technology. They gave us the gift of change. They showed us that the species that survives is not the one with the perfect plan. It is the one with the courage to try something impossible and keep trying until it works. Years later, history would record this moment as the turning point. Not the moment the star engines were built. Not the moment the political alliance was formalized. But the moment when an ancient empire, at the height of its power, admitted that it needed to learn from a younger species. That it needed to become, in some way, more human. The message it sent to civilizations across the galaxy was even more powerful than the Emperor's words. If the Vexterra could choose hope over certainty, then any civilization could. If the most logical species ever to exist could learn to embrace the impossible, then logic itself had limits. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through superior weapons or advanced technology. They had done something far more remarkable. They had conquered it by being the species that believed in the impossible. They had survived everything the universe had thrown at them by refusing to accept that anything was inevitable, unchangeable, or beyond hope. Morrison stood with the two princesses on the observation platform of the new Imperial Palace. It was smaller than the old one, less grand, more functional. The Vexterra were learning that beauty did not require perfection. "What do you think the other civilizations will learn from this?" Ilya asked. Morrison considered the question carefully. "I think they will learn that the strongest species is the one willing to change. The most advanced civilization is the one that can learn from others. And the greatest empire is not one built on control, but one built on the courage to trust in something that cannot be calculated." Lyra smiled, and in that smile was the brightness of hope. "Then we chose well when we chose humanity." "No," Morrison replied. "Humanity chose well when we accepted your faith. Because in the end, that is what this was about. One species that had learned to trust and hope, choosing to save another species that had forgotten how." As they looked out at the transformed Vexterra civilization, with its distributed networks of power and its million paths forward, both understood something that would define the next age of galactic civilization. Sometimes the most logical choice is to believe in the impossible. A lot of people watch my videos but haven't subscribed yet. If you enjoy my content, please hit the subscribe button. It really supports the channel. And don't forget to comment below, share your thoughts, and let me know what kind of video you want to watch next.